Hello students, in the last session we have discussed strings in Python. In today's session we will discuss input in Python. Reading input in Python is very easy task, like you have read input in C programming by using a scanf function or in Java by using a readline function. Python also provides simple functions using which you can read input from the user. So let's start. Python 2.7 has two functions that can be used to get input directly from user, and these two functions are input and raw input. Now each of this input and raw input takes string as an argument and it displays that string as a prompt in the shell. So whatever string you pass to input and raw input, that will be displayed as a message on the terminal. Now in case of raw input, the input line is treated as string and becomes the value returned by the function. Now when you use a raw input, it reads the input in the form of string, not in the form of the value which you enter. So if I enter 5 or 10, even that it will read as string, not as integer. In case of function input, it treats the typed line as a Python expression and infers the type. So whatever you type on the screen when you are using an input function, it simply infers the type from the input which we have passed. Suppose if I am passing a 10, it just checks the type of the value I am passing. 10 is an integer, so it will read that 10 as a integer. It will not read it as a string like raw input. So input function infers the type, whereas raw input simply reads the input as string. Okay, let us look at one example here. This particular 3 greater than symbol represents a prompt here, and we have some Python statements here. So the first Python statement, it is name is equals to the function which is used, it is raw input, and we are passing a string to it, and the string is enter your name. So this name is a variable and we are storing value into this name by reading it by using a function raw input. When you type this statement and when you press an enter on the shell, it will display a message, enter your name. Whatever message you have passed here, the same message is displayed on the screen. And suppose we have entered George Washington. Then this George Washington will be read by raw input and that will be stored in name. So we have read one value from console and that is stored in variable name. Then we are printing the same by using a print statement. Print, are you really, in single quotes, and then we have used a comma in between. And then we have passed second argument to the print, and that second argument is the variable name, that is name. And then we actually have the third argument also, comma again, and we have a question mark over there. And when you execute the statement, it will print. You can see the output of that statement here. Are you really is the first argument. Then second argument was the name. So name having value George Washington, it has printed George Washington. All the arguments are concatenated here and displayed on the screen. Remember, whenever you pass multiple arguments to the print statement. And the third argument which has been passed, it is a question mark, and even that is concatenated and it is displayed. Just focus on this point where we have a space in between. Whenever you pass multiple arguments, while concatenating those arguments, one space is automatically added to it. Then we have a similar statement down, print, are you really? Again, instead of multiple arguments, we have sent a single argument by using concatenation here. We have used a plus in between, that is used for concatenation. So we are concatenating that this first statement, that is are you really, with the value of variable name. Then this is also concatenated with a question mark. And when you concatenate the values, there will not be an additional space, and that is the reason you don't have a space between Washington and the question mark. Okay, so this is how you can read values by using raw input, remember. Again, one more example you can just see on the right side here. Raw input, enter unint. So we are displaying a message for the user to enter an integer here, and that we are storing in n. Say user enters a value that is 3, and that 3 will be stored in n. As I have told you, raw input treats the input, whatever we enter, as string. So this 3 which we are passing, it is stored in n as a string, not as an int, remember. And that is the reason when you try to print the type of n by using a function type, it is printing string, not integer. Even though you may say I am passing an integer here as an input, but as I told you, raw input always reads input as string, not as integer. Okay, let's execute a simple program based on this to understand how we can read values in Python. Okay, let us open the idle to execute one simple program, one example. Okay, I'll open idle. You can see here the prompt is open. As I've told you, this is our prompt. This 3 greater than symbol represents the prompt. I can directly type the Python commands here, or I can create a separate file. In the previous example on the PPT, in the PPT file we have seen here, you can see it here. We have directly typed it on the prompt. Instead of typing it on the prompt now, I'll create a separate file. So I'll say file, new file. In the new file, I will type the statement. Okay, I'll say name is equals to raw underscore of input, in bracket, I'll say in double quotes or single quotes, I'll say enter your name. Okay, then on the next line, I'll simply print, I'll say the first argument in double quotes, I'll say are you really, then double quotes complete. Then second argument, I'll pass the value which we have read in the variable name. So I'll pass name, comma, the third argument I'll pass a question mark. In single quote I'll pass it. Doesn't matter you use a single quote or double quote, it is considered as string only. Okay, that's it. This is very simple program where we are reading a value from a user and we are displaying the same. Okay, let me save this. I'll save this in, okay, I'll save this in F drive. Save it as demo.py, that is Python extension, or directly you can say demo. Okay, the file is saved. Let me execute this. To execute it, you click on run, then go to run module. Okay, now you can see it is asking us, this is my program, you can see the first line. That first line is executed and the message which we have entered in raw input, that is displayed on the screen. So it is asking me to enter a name. So I'll say name as Mahesh Patil. So that will be read by raw input and it is stored in name, and then we are printing it. So I'll just press enter key here. Now you can see the second line is executed, that is print line, and it is printing, are you really Mahesh Patil? Question mark. All the arguments have been concatenated and displayed on the screen. So this is how you can read input in Python by using raw input function. Now let me read a number instead of a string. So enter an int. Okay. So I'm displaying a message as enter an integer value. When user will enter the integer value, that will be stored in name. Instead of name, now I'll say n. And we will try to print the type of that n. So by using type function, type in bracket n. Okay. Let me save it again and execute. If I enter 10 over here, you can see still it is printing the type as str. As I've told you, raw input always reads in the form of string, not in the form of integer. Okay. Now, instead of raw input, I'll use the input function over here. So, input function. And the program, I'll keep it as it is. And I'll run it again. This time, if I enter 10 and if I press enter, you can see it is displaying the type as integer, not as string. As I told you, input function infers the type from the input value. So input value here it is 10. So input function, what it does, it checks the value, and as the value is of type integer, it stores the 10 into variable n as integer, not as string. That is why the input function infers the value, whereas raw input simply reads it as a string. Okay. Suppose if I pass, I'll say input, enter your name, and I'll simply print it. I'll say name. Okay, my variable, I'll change it with name. Now I'm using input function. Let me execute it again. Okay, again the prompt, it is displayed and it is displaying the message, enter your name. Say I'll enter Mahesh Patil. What do you think it will display? Okay, let me enter and show you the output. Look at the output. It is showing the error message. So what it is saying? Press back most recent call last file f demo.py. This is my file name. Line number 1 in module. And where is that error? Name, input, enter your name. File, string, line 1. And error is at this line. What is the error? Unexpected end of file while parsing. Now, the input which we have passed, it is Mahesh Patil. This is not an integer, this is not even a string, because as I have told you in Python, if you're passing a string, it has to be either in single quotes or double quotes. Then what Python does is, it tries to consider this input as a variable. It checks if there is a variable with the name Mahesh or Patil. And as there is no variable with the name Mahesh and Patil, then it will display an error message. So whenever you are reading a string by using input function, remember you have to enclose your string in single quote or double quote. Okay, let me execute the same thing again. This time I'll enter the input in say single quotes. I'll say Mahesh Patil. and single quote complete, and I'll press enter. Now you can see the output. It is printing Mahesh Patil. It is not printing error message this time. Okay, this is about the input and raw input. In our example programs, we will be generally using raw input instead of input, because input may confuse you sometime. So we will be using raw input in our programs. Okay, next is type conversion. As we have seen, okay, raw input always reads in the form of string. Suppose if you want to read an integer by using raw input, what we can do? We have again a choice of type conversion. We can read it in the form of string, then we can convert it again into integer. And the same is done even in Java. If you remember, we have used a function like int.readLine that reads in the form of string, and later on that is converted into integer by using a function like integer.parseInt. Same way here also we can convert it into integer if you want by using some functions. So okay, how it can be done. So type conversion are used often in Python code. We use the name of a type to convert values to that type. Now one example is given here. Suppose if you want to convert a string digit or string number into integer, you can use a function that is int. Now you can see in this example, int in bracket we have in single quotes 3, then into 4, and the answer is 12. This 3 is first converted into integer and then it is multiplied with 4. So 4 3s are 12 is the answer. So the value, one more example here, the value of int 3.9 is the integer 3. As you know, int simply truncates the fractional part. So dot 9, it has been truncated and only 3 is written. So int always converts the other type into integer. In the first example, we have converted a string into integer, and in the second example, a floating point number has been converted into integer. Now let me show you the same example on the shell. I'll execute the same thing on the shell to check how it works. Okay, directly I'll execute this on the shell now. I'll not create a separate file. So firstly, I'll say in single quotes, I'll say 3 into, I'll say 4. Now look at the output of this. It is printing 3333 4 times. I told you whenever you multiply a string, it will simply repeat a string. But we don't want this. We want 3 4s, that is 12. So what we can do is we can convert this 3 into integer by using int function. So I'll say int in single quotes 3, then into 4. Now you can see the output here, it is 12, not 3333. So this is how you can convert a string into integer type in Python. Okay, even we can convert a floating value into integer type. I'll say 3.9. And if I press enter, you can see the value which is returned, it is 3. Remember, it is not rounding the value. If you round it may be 4. Integer function will not round the value. It will simply truncate the fractional part from the value. And that is the reason we are getting the output as 3 here. And this is very useful, this particular int function with the function that is raw input. Whenever you try to read digit by using raw input, you can see here we are reading 10, that is a digit, but raw input simply reads it as a string and it is returning str. By using this int function, we can convert this string into integer value. Okay, I hope you understood the two functions, that is input and raw input, and even you understood how we can convert string to integer or float to integer. We will stop here today. Thank you.